Hey guys, it's Wednesday night and I'm sitting with my husband in a rare opportunity that we're actually together.
What's happening, y'all?
We're in traffic, so this is not safe, but I thought it would be fun to jump on and just have a chat with you guys because I was thinking about our coffee talk this morning and I felt like I should have made a finer point in some of the things that I was saying. Sometimes that happens when you work really late at night and then you have two toddlers screaming. You know what I mean? It can happen. So good to see you guys. Hey, Vince, great to see you. And hey, Brandy, great to see you too. What I was trying to say after President Trump's Oval Office address is one of the things that I noticed the media doing is I felt that some of the fact checks that were prepared for post reaction to the speech were prepared to address the issue of the border wall. And that when the speech was actually delivered and President Trump talked a little bit about a steel barrier, he's still talking about a barrier, and talked about other issues, I felt like the press did not adjust. I felt that they had prepared notes that they wanted to put forward, and that's a really hard thing to do as a journalist. You spend a lot of time preparing for things that don't happen, and then you have to be brave enough to strike your content. And one of the things I felt, having watched this speech on multiple channels and seeing the reaction across the board, I felt that there was a commitment made by the press to fact check the president in a certain way before he delivered the speech. And then when the speech came off, there wasn't an adjustment. So that's what I was trying to say in Coffee Talk. I wasn't trying to defend all the president's statements. The president had a lot of different points that people take issue with, and that happens, right? There's going to be a lot of debate of what side says what. But I just noticed that, and being on the inside and knowing how these things are prepared, that's my observation. So I hope that's a little bit of a finer point on what I was trying to say. In the meantime, Leif and I are talking a little bit about what's going on now.
Well, what that is to me is what you're talking about with journalism is the same thing with combat leadership or leadership at any time, and that's building flexible plans.
Yeah.
You got to build flexible plans. So you got contingency plans that are set up, and you think about what the most likely scenarios are. But there's always going to be things that happen that you couldn't predict were going to happen. So you've got to be able to rapidly adjust to that. And Jenna, you always did a great job on that on live television.
He has to say that because I'm his wife.
And I don't have to say that, but I do because it's true.
Yeah.
And that's what a good journalist does. And yeah, I didn't see a lot of that being done.
Well, it seemed remarkable to me that the reaction across the board was the same. And you could say, well, the reaction was the same because the president needs to be fact checked on these points, but it seemed over prepared. So that's one of the things that I noticed yesterday. So we're talking a little bit about leadership and the president's leadership style as well. You know, Leif wrote this book, Extreme Ownership, How Navy SEALs Lead and Win. He wrote a second book called Dichotomy of Leadership with his business partner, Jocko Willink. And American leadership is at the core of this story. You know, if you really want to do a deep dive on what's going on here in Washington, you'd really talk about the big picture. You know, what does American leadership look like? And by the way, how do we see ourselves as Americans? You know, how we see our borders and how we see our physical country really is a reflection about, you know, how we see each other in the world. And I think there are some bigger themes that could really be dived into, even historical context, you guys. You know, what have our borders looked like in the past? How have they changed over the last 200 years? They haven't always been the same. How have we handled this before? And I feel like that's missing, and it's something that I'd like to do a little bit more. But getting back to the president's leadership style, here's what happened today. So the president, he set this up. Remember, he gets in front of the whole country and he says, I'm inviting congressional leadership to the White House tomorrow to try to figure this out. And he mentions it doesn't have to be a concrete barrier, it can be a steel barrier, right? What he says happened at the White House today via Twitter. Can I just say God bless Twitter? Is that appropriate?
Sure.
He's yes, I can.
Sure.
I mean, I know people don't like the president's tweets sometimes, but as a journalist, I'm like, at least we have access. We know exactly what he's thinking all the time. All the time. We know what he's thinking. But he said that he walked in and said, are we going to solve this thing? Are you going to approve anything for a steel barrier? And Nancy Pelosi said no. And he said, all right, see you guys later, and walked out. I mean, the president has said that before. This is his negotiation technique. I'm going to go back and look at the art of the deal, skim it a little bit. and see, because he talks a little bit about leverage in that, and I'm curious if he's following certain patterns. But
You're talking about Trump's book, The Art of the Deal.
yeah, President Trump's book, The Art of the Deal. So, anyhow, let's get Leif's thoughts. I'm not going to point the phone at Leif because I feel like it might be unsafe. He's going to look at you, and then we're going to rear end somebody, and it's going to happen live, and then you guys are going to be called into court, and you're going to be witnesses. So we're not going to do that. But Leif, what is your take on the president's leadership style? And if you could advise the president, not on the political sides of this, not to build a barrier or whatever, how would you advise him to lead over the next 24 hours? How could he adjust his leadership skills to maybe get a better result? That's a tough question. That's a good one, right? Okay.
Yeah, I think that is a tough question. Listen, I think, if for the result that he's striving for, which is getting funding for the border wall or the steel barrier now, as they're talking about it, I think he's got to hold the line, and I think it's we always talk about being default aggressive. You got to be default aggressive if you want to accomplish the mission. Aggressive doesn't mean aggressive toward people. It doesn't mean you're going to yell and scream at folks. That's never an effective way to lead, regardless of what misconceptions people may have about the military. Good leaders in the military don't do that either. That's not just doesn't work. So we're talking about default aggressive means aggressive toward accomplishing the mission, being proactive to solve problems, and I think in that mode, his negotiating tactic here is. It's curious to me that Democrats are saying, if just open the government back up and then we'll negotiate. Well, the only leverage point he has is government shutdown. So that seems to me that you're never going to get the funding if funding for the wall is the goal, and I think it's a valid goal. I think it's a valid goal, for our border security. But if that's the goal, then he's going to have to hold the line. He's going to have to rally Republicans for that.
Let me just ask you guys. Let me just ask Leif this, and I never like to put Leif in a situation where he shares classified information. We don't do that in our family. It's not good, nor is it legal. But Leif has spent quite a bit of time along the southern border in California for doing some training, and maybe you can speak, because you just said that you think it is a worthy cause, a steel barrier wall. With your military experience, having seen somewhat of what's going on the southern border in California, why do you think that's a worthy goal? Why, with someone with a military background, why would you say that that's worthwhile?
I think it's worthwhile because, just my experience, I spent a lot of time in eastern San Diego County in training. So we'd go out there and we conduct training, and we spent time out just north of the border in eastern California and eastern San Diego County, and it was just, it's hard to even describe the amount of people that are coming across the border there illegally. Because
you're talking crazy. About a very rural area too,
yeah, it's
right?
It's a rural area. It's a rural area. So we're trails, and if you just, you're talking about beautiful country. You can go up in the Laguna Mountains, east of San Diego, and you get off on these trails, and there's water bottles and blankets and just trash and just you can tell there's thousands of people that are moving across through that area over the course of the years, and the reason a lot of that traffic was driven out there is because there is a wall. There's a wall in San Diego, between San Diego and Tijuana. That wall drove a lot of the illegal border crossing traffic east as a result of that. So, in my experience, there's a lot worse problem in eastern San Diego County where there isn't a border wall than there is in the western part where there is a border wall. So I think there's
so strategically, if you were a military commander that's supposed to secure America, you think that building a barrier of some sort?
Yeah, I think a barrier is valid for sure, and it's gonna help you. It's gonna help you in that regard. Otherwise, you have to have people chained together across, to say they're definitely, and that just doesn't work. It's also a deterrent. Obviously, there's a lot of different things that go into that. As far as enforcing our immigration laws and border security. It's not just about a barrier, but I think that barriers, in my experience, seem to be an effective means. And just the amount of people coming across the border was always something that was alarming to me. And not only to see these beautiful areas of eastern San Diego County that were just completely trashed, but obviously the people that are making this incredibly dangerous journey, and putting themselves and their children at risk.
And you know what? I feel like that over the last 48 hours has been really missed in the news. And I can't help, I've just been reflecting on this Washington Post piece where a reporter went into Guatemala, to the rural area where the little girl, remember, a couple weeks ago passed away in U.S. custody. Talking, and I spoke a little bit about this at the time, talking to people on the ground in Guatemala. You have people in orphanages and in schools talking about children suddenly leaving, classrooms being more empty because, and this is their take, that there was knowledge that if you come across the border with a child, whether or not that child belongs to you, you have more of a chance of staying in America. And partisan debate talks about that, but it was interesting for me to read a piece where the concern was from inside the country. And I just can't help but think about this mother that was interviewed, and she sent her 6 or 7-year-old daughter with a young man in his early 20s. And just the thought that I, as a mother, am going to let my child go, to be that worried and desperate. And it's like, I feel like that whole conversation is completely lost. I don't know how to solve that problem. But, while everyone's having this big debate about what we should do about national security, I also think that there's a certain humanity that's lost.
It's definitely a humanitarian crisis.
Yeah,
for sure.
I just feel like
I weep for the children that are being put in those situations. And it's, I think buying, anything that we do to encourage those folks to put children at risk and put their families at risk to do that, I think is
right.
We're complicit in
we're
deaths.
incentivizing it.
Exactly.
And I just wanted to share this one other thing. I've gone back to this interview many times. Leif knows how much I love talking to the historian at Ellis Island, Barry Moreno. He's like my favorite person in the entire world besides my husband. And I just want to point out that, when I was speaking to him about immigration and how immigration was handled before, he just reminded me that immigration was not always a federal issue. It wasn't always a problem that the government had to solve. That states really they were responsible in a lot of ways. Now it changed because immigration, clearly, who becomes an American citizen is a federal issue, and our borders are a federal issue. But the significant role of charity groups and the significant role of advocacy groups and non-government groups to help those that came into the country was really significant. And so this idea that we would be detaining or holding families is a relatively new idea. And quite frankly, it's a big problem because we clearly don't have the resources to do it. We don't have the judges to process it. We don't have the beds. We don't have the facilities. We know that that's a huge problem. And so, but that's a new problem for the federal government. I just want you guys to know that wasn't always a federal government issue. That wasn't always, this is our responsibility. As soon as they come across the border, if they're applying for asylum, we're going to take care of you for a certain period of time until you're able to be transferred to a family member that can sponsor you until you wait for your court date. So anyways, I thought that was sort of interesting. I've been reflecting a little bit on that. Do you guys have any questions that you'd like to talk about? Traffic is speeding up, so I always get a little nervous when Leif is driving, although he's a really good driver. He reminds me that he was trained by the U.S. military. Anything that you guys would like to discuss before we sign off? This was kind of a fun event. I think we should do this more. It could be sitting in traffic with Jenna and Leif. So hey, just to wrap it up, I don't know what's going to happen next. Just remember, if the shutdown goes into Saturday, then it's going to be the longest government shutdown in American history, which only dates back to mid-1970s, when we started doing budget appropriations this way. So just kind of mention that as well. And we'll see. I don't know who, even if Republicans in Congress decide that they're going to go along with Democrats and try to pass some legislation, the president has said that he's not going to sign it. So the chips are in the Oval Office right now, and we'll see who makes some sort of concession So one of you asking, I see, is this the reason to shut down the government? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know whenever it's appropriate to shut down the government. Or really, if we just decided in the 1970s to do appropriations, and that's assigning money, by the way, appropriations is a fancy way of assigning money. Like, maybe we should think of a different way to fund it. I mean, we've changed it before, so maybe we should take this government shutdown thing off the table and actually make people talk to each other. I don't know. I know that sounds like.
You mean they'd actually, Congress would have to pass a budget instead of a continuing
Yes.
resolution?
So they'd actually have to do a budget, and then they would have to talk to each other. I know. It sounds crazy. Back in the day when there wasn't Twitter or cameras all around, they actually sat around and shared a glass of wine. Okay. Thank you, Leah. I appreciate that. Oh, Ben is saying Senator Babin. Oh man, I don't know if I could be how could I as an independent, would I be a good politician's wife, Leif? Because I would be I'd be like a non.
You always speak your mind. I appreciate that about
I
you.
know, but I'd be a registered independent.
I would be okay with that.
Okay. I think America would need a free woman as a politician's wife. Okay. I like that. Lindy is right. They need the get along shirts. Yeah, I think you're right. Everyone should just go up there, have a couple margaritas, and figure this out. I feel like that would just sort of, grease the wheels a little bit, and we could. I'm not proposing alcoholism. I'm just saying that I think it could. Gotta loosen up a little bit. Okay. On that note, I'm gonna sign off. Thank you, Brandy. All right, guys, you're the best. Don't forget, everything's gonna work out in the end. Promise. And we got the play-by-play, so don't worry about it. Go do something else. Tomorrow morning I'll have the update, and then you got you covered. All right. Bye, guys. I'll talk to you later. Say bye.
See y'all later.
Okay. Bye, guys.